episode 30 of the Broadway Shuffle, a Texas Tech sports podcast with Conrad, Clayton, and Zyler. I'm Brennan, and today we are joined by Texas Tech Senior Associate Athletics Director Robert Giovannetti. Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me on. I was telling you before we got on, this podcast is starting to take the Tech fandom by storm. So I'm pleased to be a guest early on in your career as you're on the way up.
Yeah, man, we appreciate that, man. We're surprised that some students found us, but we're very thankful, and so that's great to hear. So you said you teach a class at Texas Tech. What class do you teach?
I teach a sports PR class, and so I've got about 100 in there. And as we were wrapping up and we were talking about podcasts, I just said, "Hey, what are some of your favorite podcasts?" And the first guy out of the chute said Broadway Shuffle, and then I said, did somebody tell you to say that if I asked that? Because I knew you guys had reached out to me. And then somebody else said, man, that's a great show. And so two of them right there out of, I probably had 60 there that day. So look at that. You guys are touching young minds.
That's all. That's our mission here at the Broadway Shuffle. So it's great to hear. Well,
context, yes.
Yes, sir. Yep. Yes, sir. So we're super thankful you're on. We can't wait for our listeners to learn about you and a little bit into the inside knowledge of Texas Tech athletics. So why don't you just start just with a general introduction of your history at Texas Tech, some background about how you got to where you are, then we'll kind of go into the episode from there.
Yeah, so I'm Senior Associate Athletics Director. I oversee all of our external units here at Texas Tech: marketing, fan engagement, comms, broadcast services, and our digital space. I've been at Texas Tech Athletics since June of 2015. I got hired by Kirby Hocutt. Wow. And before that, I had worked 2 years for Chancellor Ken Hance, and then I worked 2 years for President Dwayne Nellis on campus before Kirby hired me in 15 to come over here, and I've been here ever since. So a great decision when I decided to do it. I was running our public broadcasting for the university when Kirby asked me to come over, and I was thinking in my head, no, because I had it was a pretty easy job, but for some reason I said yes, and here I am today.
That's awesome.
You know, it's funny, Kirby Hocutt to us is the guy that introduces new coaches and that we see, every, yeah. Once or twice a year at a press conference. What is it like working in that athletics office? I know that's, probably a lot of stuff goes on that the general fan doesn't see. How is that with Kirby in that office?
Yeah, Kirby is really fantastic. I hate to hear you say that. One of my jobs is to get him out there. So I guess I need a better job of getting him out here besides, because I hate it when we hire a new coach, because it means we've lost a coach. But I'm part of Kirby's executive team. So there is, I think, 9 of us on his executive team. And we've been there anywhere from, I think the Jennifer Bashir, our compliance director, has been there 25 plus years to, our most recent hires have been there within a couple of years. So we've got a great team. Kirby is a really good boss. Kirby is there's a couple of things that I'm not sure people realize about Kirby. He's very thoughtful. And by that, I don't mean like he gets you gifts and stuff. He thinks things through. He'll think about something, he'll sit there and think about it, and he'll get back to you the next day or something. He's taught me a lot as far as just how to operate and how to conduct business. And I think we've got, I'm really close with our executive team, and we've really formed a tight bond. And I think that helps us, and hopefully it helps us provide some guidance and take some of the things off of Kirby's desk that he doesn't need to mess with. What Kirby needs to mess with are things on the very highest level, and hopefully we can provide that for him.
Yeah, you also mentioned working for Kent Hance back in the day. What was college athletics like at that time?
Yeah,
and what was it like working for him?
It was a lot different. And it's funny because when Mike Leach was fired, I was doing Mike's show. I was hosting Mike's show with Chris Level, and then so that was in 2009, and then in 2011, I ended up coming to work for Chancellor Hance. I actually was I was doing a lot of things. I owned a business, and then in that business, I had a bunch of tech related things in that kind of portfolio, and I was getting burned out. I have a daughter. She's not young anymore. She's 25, but at the time she was, 11 years old or something. And so I reached out to Chancellor Hance, and I said, hey, I'm kind of in a tough spot, just trying to decide what my next step's going to be. Do you have 15 minutes you can give me. And he responded back pretty quickly, and he said, hey, if you send me your resume, I'll give you 30. And so
Wow.
I went and saw him, and we had a pretty good conversation. And he ended up hiring me. He hired me to be the associate chancellor for communications marketing for the Texas Tech system, which, as you guys know, at the time,
Yep.
it's grown since I was there. But it's got the Health Science Center, it's got Angelo State, it's got the Health Science Center in El Paso, and so I worked for Chancellor Hance for a couple of years. And athletics was obviously a lot different. Now, Kirby had just started. Kirby started a couple of months before I did, so I kind of got to know Kirby through my time there with Chancellor Hance. And Chancellor Hance, if you know him at all, he's a very hands-on guy. Gets involved, and so I got to cut my teeth on some athletics items as well while I was there. But obviously, the scope of college athletics has changed a lot since that time. But it was a good 2-year experience, obviously, working for the chancellor.
Gio, you mentioned being at Tech when Leach was fired. What was that like? Just the morale around the school? What was your feeling and different things like that? I don't want to ask you to say anything wrong or anything like that. But what was that like, just in general, being so long ago?
Yeah, I remember exactly. So at the time, I officed in Raymar Communications, and I had just I was going to start kind of this Sunday conversation that was going to be a weekly thing. And I had just interviewed Hance, he was going to be my first guest. So I'd interviewed him. And this is in 2009. And I remember exactly where I was sitting when I just get an email come across, and it said Mike Leach had been suspended for the bowl game. And I was like, what in the world? And then, of course, we all know what happened then. I was doing the radio show at the time with Chris Level. And Level had already gone to San Antonio for the bowl game. And so I was back behind and doing the show and hosting the show from the studio. And then within a couple of days, Coach Leach was fired. And I really did, literally for 3 days, wall-to-wall coverage from about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., just answering phone calls, one after the other. And so to say the fan base was divided would be an understatement. And there are still remnants of that to this day that still exist to this day. I had no idea what we were in the midst of when this was all going on. And I do remember that, you'd get calls where people were, a guy was going to come kick my ass. All these things, because I'm just trying to facilitate the calls, get one call, let people like kind of a venting session. And then, we went down and we did a pregame show at the Alamo Bowl. Outside, it was cold, and we were there, and the crowd was kind of coming in on us. They were really they were yelling. They were kind of yelling more at Level, because he had some sources on things. They're like, name your sources, Level. And so we were just looking. I was just telling him between breaks, I say, hey, let's just look at each other. Don't make eye contact with anyone. And then as soon as our show was over, it just kind of we thought, oh, this is going to be ugly, but it dispersed. People went inside, and of course, it was a great game. We won that bowl game, but it was a weird period in Texas Tech athletics that I'm not sure we've ever truly. I think Coach McGuire has come as close to anyone to kind of help mend some of those fences, but it was definitely an interesting time. And then when I came to work for Hanson 11, then I got to see it from the other side, right? I'd still see the emails that he would receive and the calls he would receive. And so, and it's funny, through the years, I've had a chance to think about it. There's no really, you can be a lot of things in this, right? Like I wasn't close with Mike Leach, but I hosted his radio show. And I obviously am a Tech fan, and I liked what he did for Texas Tech. And so I've told this to people. I had a guy that reached out to me and said, you should be ashamed. You worked for Hance, and you're talking, because I made a comment about Coach Leach when he passed. And, this isn't a one-size-fits-all situation, right? There are so many layers to it. And you would hope that 15 years later that we could all kind of just say, yeah, what did we learn from this, and let's move on. But it certainly can be. You want to start a argument at a party, talk politics, or bring up Mike Leach, and you're off to the races.
Kidding. No.
Yeah. We were all students from 2015 to 2020, so we experienced the Cliff departure and the Matt Wells hire. And I think even within the student base, it had probably, I was at the 08 Texas Tech game. I was 12 years old. So we were young in the Leach era, but I still was like, hire Mike Leach. Like no matter what, every time I feel like, and I think even though he's passed away, I still think if Joey would ever move on, someone would say, where's Mike Leach? You know, it just, it's just always been there since he departed. There's just a loyalty to him, and unfortunate that he's no longer with us, but he still made a huge impact on Texas Tech athletics. So
he certainly did, winningest coach in our history. And, you know, this is how we do the Hall of Fame here. We have former student athletes, letter winners, not student athletes, letter winners, that have a committee, and they form the ballot and they send it out to all the former letter winners, and they vote on the Hall of Fame. And when Coach Leach a couple years ago got nominated for the Ring of Honor, the Hall of Honor, which is just for coaches in the Hall of Fame, it's basically it was almost like a yes no thing. Should Coach Leach be in the Hall of Honor? And it was overwhelming yes. And we were very, very sensitive to this. We did not want to make it look like, oh, hey, we're trying to do something after he passed. And so Toby Cecil, who is former player for Coach Leach, he's a banker in Lubbock. He was on the committee, and he called Sharon Leach and said, hey, Mike's been nominated and elected. Do you have a problem with this? And she said no, and they were great. And the family came and came to the Hall of Fame induction, and it was great, right? And I thought I was hopeful that it might be a little closure for everyone, that, you had a lot of former players here that Coach Leach really touched it. And so it was nice. It was a great weekend. Hopefully they felt it was a great weekend as well. And just as recently as a couple weeks ago, Danny Amendola was here in his induction, and he talked about Coach Leach in his induction. So he obviously had an impact on a lot of players, and obviously our program too.
Man, that's great stuff, Joe. I kind of want to take it back just a little bit. Most people probably were introduced to you in the Tech athletics realm with the Red Raider Sports. That's something that you were kind of known for. Talk a little bit about that. That's the preeminent message board for, Texas Tech fans right now. But you were kind of the godfather there. Talk a little bit about that startup and how that all happened. Not because I know, because I'm genuinely curious. I want to hear how somebody, made that happen.
As a disclaimer, I don't have anything to do with the site anymore. I really will have people. I had a guy come up to me in the airport about a year ago and said, hey, I can't log into your site, overseas. And I said, are you talking about the Tech website? And he goes, no, Red Raider Sports. I said, hey, man, I haven't anything to do with that since 2011. But in the early 2000s, I had a business partner, and she and I had started a video production company. And we were kind of slogging through, having some tough times, and bought a magazine, to just kind of a separate deal magazine. There was a guy that out of Stillwater, Oklahoma, he had a magazine in every Big 12 city. And he was thinking there'd be something to that as far as economy of scale. It didn't work. You had to have so many niche markets. So we ended up buying Red Raider Sports Magazine. And it didn't take long to kind of figure out, hey, we need to have, I know it seems crazy now, especially you young guys, but there just wasn't a lot of web presence then. And so I started looking at, so at the time there was Rivals and Scout were the two big ones, and the Rivals guys. And then Scout was run by a guy named Jim Heckman. And so I talked to both those places, and there was a Rivals website called Red Raider Extreme that was run by Jason Sukamel, who's at Orange Bloods. He's a Longhorn. And he runs Orange Bloods down there, and Jason's a great guy. And so Jason was kind of a designer and things and running the site. And I'm deciding, okay, let me take over Red Raider Extreme. And so we did that, and did that for a couple months, and they had a guy named Chris Level that was doing some work for them. And so finally one day I called Level and just rode to practice with him, and just said, and this guy, I said, man, this guy's a beast, right? He wants to know everything. He's making contacts with everybody. He knows about recruiting. And so I kind of recruited him to say, hey, what would it take to get you to come on? He had a job at the time. We kind of weaned him in eventually, and then eventually got him on full time. And so And so we started from, I think we had, I think when I started with it, they had 31 subscribers, paid subscribers, something like that. I don't have any idea what it is now, but it's in the thousands, obviously. It's a beast now compared to what it was when we first started it. And then when we were doing that, again, I was, my company, my partner and I, we were renting a space from Raymar, and they didn't have all the radio stations they have now, but they did have a couple, and they had 950 AM Fox Talk. So
nice.
You guys know Jack. You guys have heard of Jack Dale, obviously, icon in tech broadcasting. His name's hanging from the arena. So Jack Dale had a show. I think it was called Sports Line, Jack Dale Sports Line, and Level was a frequent guest. And then one day Jack couldn't be there, and so Level and I did the show. And when we were walking to the elevator to go down to go to our cars, I said, man, we should do our own show. And so I went to Brad Moran, who owned Fox Talk 950, and we bought an hour of airtime between, I think, the Glenn Beck show and Ag Talk. And they fit us in there. And so we started out by buying our time and doing the show. And then eventually it got popular, and the show grew. And then eventually he started, at the time it was 104.3, the all sports station. They moved it to 97.3. And so, but Tech Talk was kind of a cornerstone of all that when it was getting started, and really proud of that, because we had a lot of people really tell us, hey, you're not going to, you guys are going to fail, right? You're going to, I had a lot of prominent advertising people say, hey, look, you guys just aren't going to make a go of this. Yeah, I'm sorry. But we kind of fought through it, because of the video production side we did a lot of things with the website that people weren't. Again, this all seems so basic now, but at the time, like, who are these guys shooting video out of practice and doing practice reports on video? And,
that's awesome.
And again, got made fun of a lot by people, but we had all the components, and we just kind of fought our way through. I used to tell Level at a certain point, I was like, hey, someday we're going to be those guys. I said, let's not try to make fun of the guys coming up when we're doing it, because you just never know, right? You just never know what's going to happen, what's going to resonate with people. And I think what we did kind of resonated with people. I think the fact that the site is still as healthy as it is today. One of the things that Level and I decided early on, right? He's going to be kind of the content guy. He's going to be the one that finds out who's starting, who's hurt, who those things. He's going to be the one talking to the recruits. And then I would just kind of handle the rest of it. And one of the things that we really wanted was a sense of community. And this is why local radio works to an extent, right? Because there's a sense of community. You hear the guys, you understand the guys, and your podcast will be like that too, right? People will start to know you guys and know what you like and don't like. And so there's still things, it's shtick, right? It's all shtick. And there's still things that are part of that shtick that people to this day, I haven't done Tech Talk since 11. And that will still come up to me and say, hey, I remember this from Tech Talk or something like that. And we just kind of pieced it all together, right? So you had the magazine, and then the website kind of took off, and then we did the radio show. And from there, because of shtick, I mean, I'd get myself in all kinds of trouble on the radio show by just saying stupid stuff. And Larry Hayes was the head baseball coach at the time, a good Christian man. And after the show's over and our board ops like on the phone, he was like, hey, Larry Hayes wants to talk to you. He's pointing at me. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do to offend Larry Hayes? And so I get on the phone and I was like, yes, coach. And he goes, hey, we're losing our play-by-play guy. And he goes, would you like to be our play-by-play guy next spring? And, I love baseball. I've always been a huge baseball fan, had never been a play-by-play guy. And I said, told Coach Hayes that, and he goes, you're pretty smart. You'll figure it out. It's baseball. And so just a lot of things came from it that you don't know at the time are going to happen. There's a thing called unintended consequences. And I think if you do your job and you just bust it like I think we did and do, I think good things kind of happen. And I'm not a big believer in this was meant to be or that was meant to be. I'm a big believer in it happens because you make it happen, right? You put one thing on top of the other, and next thing you know, here's where you are.
Man, I got to ask, you mentioned, good segments, bad segments. What was your best bit? And then what was your maybe worst bit on Tech Talk?
I saw that in your email. One of the things, the guy named Mike Lewis who wrote Moneyball, uh, and he did a story on Coach Leach in the New York Times, and we had him on. We felt like we were really on top of the world. And again, just to age myself and to crack you guys up, when we would do a show, we would have to burn it onto a CD to have it in archive. And so it'd have to be recorded by somebody. And so we were feeling the high after that Michael Lewis episode, and our board op goes, "Hey man, I forgot to record it." And so we never had a recording. It was awful.
That's terrible.
I think one of the funniest things that happened to us is we like to be prepared, right? When we had guests on, we had some great guests, and Dan Patrick started a show that was on our station. And so I reached out to his producer and I said, "Hey, Dan Patrick, we'd love to have him on our show." And he goes, "Yeah, okay." Dan does guest appearances on Tuesdays, Thursdays. And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And we talked about when we could have him. And the next Tuesday, we're just live on the air, and our board op goes, "Hey, Dan Patrick's on the phone." And I guess they just said, "Hey, book him next Tuesday." So we weren't prepared at all for that. And but it worked out okay. He was great. He's a pro, obviously, and helped out these idiots in a small market. But I can't really think of a bit that went bad. I mean, there's stuff that I would always make fun of, like the roads and the I was like, does anyone not communicate about construction, and why are these roads always torn up? And one day the guy called me and he's like, "I'm the foreman of the road crew. Did you know we were actually 6 months ahead of schedule?" And I was like, "Oh," I said, "Hey man, it's just shtick. It's just jokes." And he goes, "Well, it's not a joke to me." And he goes, "I can slow this project down." And I was like, no. And I asked him to be on the show, but he didn't want to be on. But it's just stuff like that, right? When you do it every day, you've got to come up with some things, especially if it's June 10th, and you're not in the College World Series, and there's just not a lot happening. You gotta come up to your own devices sometimes to come up with some things to talk about and keep people entertained. And hopefully, live radio is again, podcast didn't exist at that time, and Level is in the podcast business now. But it was great, man. Those were great times. I think back on those times, and I just think of, again, I think it's all helps me get to where I am today of just having that kind of experience under my belt.
Talk about your transition from that side of Tech athletics into actual Texas Tech athletics. What was that like?
It was interesting for sure. Kirby, this was in 2015, and again, I was in, and I thought was my retirement job, and Kirby. I actually reached out to Kirby because he had made some changes in external ops, and I saw it all right. I'm writing. I was a broadcaster, so I saw the broadcast side, all those things, and I said, "Hey," I've got some thoughts on your staff if you just want to meet. And so we started talking, and then he asked me to go to lunch, and we went to lunch, and we just started talking about it. He goes, "I wasn't really going to fill this position, but I think I'd like to fill it now. And would you be interested in it?" And again, I already told you guys that I didn't think I would, but it's definitely interesting, right? Because now you're on the other side. Now I think it helps because I know what guys like you and are going through, right? I understand that. It's funny. I will read Red Raider Sports. I read all the message boards, and I always chuckle when I see, well, these guys won't ask hard questions because they know Tech will pull their credentials. And the next time that we pull somebody's credentials for asking a hard question will be the first time we've ever done. I don't ever have a problem with reporters doing their job, right? I think that's because of my background, right? I'm like, hey, you got to ask the hard questions. You need to ask hard questions. It doesn't make me mad. It makes me mad when they're unfair or they're inaccurate or things like that. But if they're asking a simple, direct, "Hey, what's the problem here?" question, I don't have a problem with it at all. And so I always do try to. I think there's a couple things. I try to act kind of as the voice of the fan because I was one for so long. I'm not a typical athletic department employee who kind of they start coming out of college and they build their way up and they build their way up. They become an assistant director, a director, an associate athletics. I got placed right into, hey, you're a senior associate athletics director. And I had to earn, I think, the trust of my colleagues. I told you about Kirby's exec team. I mean, and they're kind of thinking the same thing. What we're bringing this media hack in here to be. I've worked here years to get to my spot, and so you got to. I don't take any of those things lightly, right? I understand. And look, one of the things I tell my class at the last day is, hey, you got to ignore the haters. And when you're in a really public position, and I am in a public position, people are going to dislike you for a variety of reasons. And I've read before, like, well, no wonder we're in this problem. Kirby's getting coaching advice on how to hire coaches from a guy that used to be a message board moderator. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not I do have a good relationship with Kirby and I counsel him on a lot of things, but I'm not on any coaching decisions or things like that that should make people feel good or not. But you just kind of have to earn your stripes a little bit. And it was a hard transition to learn this side of it. And I'm still learning. I still learn things. And I think the things that I don't know by having grown up in an athletic department that I'm still kind of learning are great to one extent. One of the reasons Kirby actually said he wanted to hire me was he said, I want to bring somebody in that does have a different perspective that hasn't always just worked in an athletic department. And I think for the most part, it works out. I love Tech fans. When we win, I feel good personally. I feel good professionally, right? When we lose, I'm upset professionally. I'm upset personally. And so I think there's some merit to that. And I think it helps make me a better employee.
Gio, if Kirby ever needs real, some very unique outside perspectives, let him know that we're just a phone call away. We would love to counsel on any sort of hires. We got some guys that are in a unique age cohort.
I'll say that we know that at least 2 students love their work.
Yeah, right? that's a ringing endorsement, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
At least 2 of them.
Yeah, at least 2. Gio, we didn't pull the rest. Yes.
Gio, I appreciate what you said about ignoring the haters, because we had a couple episodes a few weeks ago that got in the Colorado fan base somehow, and we all experienced a lot of hate. So I appreciate your words of wisdom there. But wanted to ask as well.
You have to.
Yeah, you got to. They're going to come, and we got to embrace the hate, I guess. So. Just wanted to ask as well, how has intercollegiate athletics changed in the last 8 to 10 years? I mean, there's so many different things that have changed, but what would be the top 2 or 3 for you, and what's been impactful working in collegiate athletics during that time period?
I think obviously the easy answer, the low-hanging fruit is NIL and now revenue share, right? That's changed the game completely. And in the past, we would work to, like say in this office, the communication side of this office, you'd work to protect our student athletes, to keep them from talking to certain people. And now you can't do that, right? Now you can't limit their appearances or what they do. And that's been a learning curve for a lot of people, because our team does have the best intentions for the student athletes, but just sometimes you just got to let them do their own thing. Now that, to me, that's obviously the most prevalent thing that has changed. Just from what I've seen, though, just the changing in recruiting rules and what's happening there is really changing, like what the creative team that I have, what's expected of them and what they do. It's become kind of an arms race to be, okay, what cool things can you do for recruits and how can you do it? And so we've got a great creative team, and I like where we're positioned, but it's a lot, right? It can be a lot. And I think that's changed a lot. And then I just think the overall, the explosion, the fragmentation of media has really made a difference, as well as we look at who do we credential and who's real media and who's not real media, and who even determines, is there such a thing as real media, right? All these things that 2024 is so much different than 2014 or 2015 when I even started here. And so it makes you think, what's it going to be like in 2030? I mean, there's going to be things out there we haven't even imagined yet. So it's challenged us to not be set in our ways. It's challenged us to say, hey, just because something's always been done in a way doesn't mean we need to keep doing that. I want us to be on the forefront of these things. It's hard because there's so many changes, but I think just technology changes, and then the student athlete space changing so much, I think have been the biggest challenges for us. But ultimately, I always tell our people we're working in college athletics, right? We have a lot going on. These are busy jobs. It's not life and death. It's sports. It's athletics, and there's a great juice to it. I've worked in a newsroom and I've worked around news and media, and I get that same kind of feeling there that I get here that I wouldn't get in another kind of position. And so it's one of those situations you're either cut out for it or you're not. And if you're not, it's not a negative. It just means you're probably normal, right? Because we work a lot of hours. We're stressed and these things all, about, waiting for the results of a game. But there's something just really kind of intrinsically beautiful about it too, right? It's fun and it's exciting and it's challenging. And those things I think get you to wake up for the next day and come back to work.
Yeah, Gio, specifically on that, where do you see Texas Tech athletics moving in the next 5 years? You talked about all these changes. Do you feel like Texas Tech is equipped to succeed with some of these innovative marketing ideas? And you talk about social media and recruitment efforts. Where do you see Tech in 2030?
Yeah, I see us in a good spot. And I'll tell you why. Because Kirby is, I've been with Kirby. I know who he's talking to. I know what his thoughts are for the future. And then we've got really great, really forward-thinking donors. I hate to name names because then I'll forget somebody, but you guys know all the it's the usual suspects, right? But they want us to be successful, and they see it that, hey, look, there's so much towards this, the double T, that it benefits from a robust, healthy, winning athletic department. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, you can look at it very simplistically and go, it's athletics. So what? You've got to look at the bigger picture, right? To say, what does this mean for Texas Tech as a whole? What does this mean for the Lubbock and West Texas community? What does this mean for this region? And I think when you start doing those things, you start realizing the importance, and you start also seeing we've got really smart people that have been wildly successful in their private, personal endeavors that want to make this work. And I think that does position us to be in a good spot. It's not going to be, it's not going to be linear. We're not going to see this. It's going to be rocky. We got to hold on. And, but I think when it all shakes out, and I do think there'll be another shakeout, I think Texas Tech is going to be positioned very well.
Yeah, Gio, two comments on that. One, I know you spoke on it a little bit, but I don't know that every fan, and maybe I don't even quite understand this, how important it is to have alignment between both the coaches, the administrations, Kirby and your team, and then also the donors. Speak a little bit more on, what that looks like and how important that is. And then two, you talk about another shakeup. What exactly do you see there? And kind of, from people who may not know what you're referencing by that, talk a little bit about those two things.
I think the alignment is really important. And I think it starts at the top. Kirby kind of sets the message, and then the donors, come in, and say, this is how we can help, and this is how we want to help. And I think Kirby has a great relationship with the coaches. We have a head coaches meeting once a month. Stays in contact with the coaches. Kirby, the things that people don't see about Kirby: great relationship with the student athletes. Always will, meet with them. I went into Kirby's office the other day, and Pete Robertson, who, I can't remember when Pete left, but he's in there just hanging out with Kirby, and just, he'd back in town. And Kirby's really good about that. And so I think what you've got donors that are helping to go, okay, we understand what it takes to succeed right now in the NIL space, eventually in the revenue sharing space, and there'll still be an NIL space as well. And by what I mean about a shakeup is, we saw happen, a couple of years ago, where Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12 to go to the SEC, and this is their first year of doing that. And, we saw the Pac-12 just get decimated, and now you've got the Pac-12 schools and the Big 12. I just don't believe the current iteration of college athletics that we see right now is the way it's going to look 10 years from now. I think it's going to change again in some form or fashion. And I think that's what Texas Tech fans should feel is important to say. We don't want to be relegated to some lesser type of athletic ecosystem, whatever that would be. And so if there is a top tier of that, I think Texas Tech is positioned to put itself in there. Look, we get it. We got to win. We got to win in football primarily. And I think obviously we've got the guy to do that. And then I think we've got the fan support to make it happen as well.
One final thing, I hate to ask, several questions in a row. You talk about the fan support and what that's meant for, not only our football program, but our basketball programs and our other athletic programs. Talk a little bit about the Texas Tech support for, Lubbock and Texas Tech, and how much that means to the athletic department.
It's huge. And I think not just the Lubbock, Lubbock community is great, but just the Texas Tech family. Every place probably says this, but I really believe that here. I just think there's kind of this esprit de corps amongst Texas Tech people, right? Because we've always had the fight. We fought to get in the Southwest Conference. We fought to get in the Big 12. We're fighting now. And it doesn't take just one or two people. It takes the whole group. And when you look at what we've done, let's say in football, for example, where, Joey has turned this thing around. But our fans just continue to support us, right? They continue to buy tickets. They continue to buy merchandise. We're one of Adidas' top performing schools already. All these things don't just happen by accident. It's because our fans are so loyal and so tied into what we're doing. And we just can't thank them enough. I've gone to a lot of places on the road where I'm seeing I don't see this kind of support that we get at Texas Tech. And I get it, right? I'm part of it. I want to win just as much as the next person. I want to play in a national championship game in football before they, put me 6 feet under. I want all those things to happen. And I think they are going to happen. And I think, but we continue to come back to our fans and we ask them to do more and more and more. And you can't be afraid or ashamed to ask that, because I think we all want to get to the same place. And our fans keep doing it. They keep answering the call. And I love that about Texas Tech fans. I love the passionate Tech fan, the pissed off, passionate Texas Tech fan. Hey, sign me up. I love it. The happy Texas Tech, all of it, right? Because you don't get this about I don't want just any random job, right? College athletics has this unique ability to bring us all together, and all has, whether it be in complete rage or in like just ecstasy. You don't get that in a lot of things. And so I love our fans. I love that our fans come ready to help us every year, and they continue to do it. And they continue to amaze me.
It's great.
That's awesome.
For sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, definitely agree that Joey's done a great job in turning this around so far. What was the process like in finding him and then eventually hiring him as the head coach?
Well, as I told you guys earlier, they don't ask me on hiring coaches, but I did get to when we hired Joey. Kirby kind of filled me in, and he said, "Hey, this guy, Joey McGuire," he said, "it's unbelievable. His energy is incredible." And so I was fortunate enough to get to fly on Regent Campbell's plane from Fort Worth to Waco to pick up Joey and Debbie and their daughter Reagan.
Wow!
And bring them here, and then in the first couple months, so I'm over here on the east side of Jones Stadium. The football building is to the south of us, and Sonny Cumbie was running the football program at the time, and Joey didn't want to get involved. He didn't want to mess up with that, so he officed over here. And so we got to see him every day, and I kept thinking, man, this guy can't really be like this, but he really is like this. I mean, he's upbeat, he's positive, and all those things are fine. It only goes so far if you don't win, right? And so he's turning it, right? And he understands that better than anybody. Talking to him last night, I happened to be close to him on the plane last night. We were just talking about how close we were this year, and I know, again, fans sometimes get tired of that, but when you look at our history, we could do something we haven't done a lot of, which is win 9 games if we, win our games against West Virginia and win the bowl game. And again, that's not, none of us are, you can say that, and doesn't mean, hey, we're satisfied with that. We do want more. But I do think this is the guy to get us there. And I think he impressed that committee from day one when they talked to him. I remember them just telling me, God, this guy really does seem to have, everything put together here. And he hasn't wavered from that since he's been here. And so I love the guy and I love having him here. And I think he's the kind of guy that really can be successful and wants to be successful. He's got to do it, right? We all get it. Again, words are words are words are words. And eventually Kirby will say this, everything we do has a scoreboard. And so
that's a great quote.
The words are only so much until you start win. But I do think we've got the right people in place.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that we're already one of Adidas's top performing schools, which I just think is awesome. I think we're all on board that we've loved the gear since day one. Super excited about the partnership with Adidas, Texas Tech, Patrick Mahomes. Talk about how that deal came into place. I'm sure Pat was a big part of,
huge part,
maybe pushing it a little bit, just a tad as much as he can throw his weight around, which is quite a bit. So talk a little bit about that. What that has meant for the university and what that means for Pat, how that's played out as a whole.
Yeah, and it's funny. We had a great relationship with Under Armour. We had a lot of success with Under Armour. We felt good about Under Armour, but anytime you have an iconic figure like Patrick Mahomes, the face of the NFL, one of maybe the top 5 athletes in the world, and he wants to align, right? He wants his brand, Adidas, and now his Gladiator brand, to align with his school. And we're very fortunate that there may be a big time, college athlete or a professional athlete out there that is as connected with his alma mater as Patrick is, but I can't think of one right off the top of my head. He's really locked in with Texas Tech. And so he got the ball rolling, and then Kirby Hocutt and Jonathan Buchos, our deputy, they negotiated and worked with Adidas. And then when we finally got to that space, then my team and several others here, we have been meeting with Adidas, since last August or September, 3 or 4 times a week leading up to the July 1st rollout that, hey, we're now an Adidas school, to the August rollout where we rolled out the Gladiator announcement. Patrick gave a gift to the South End Zone. He announced his team, Mahomes, the 6 student athletes that he had an NIL deal with. And then our game against Colorado where we wore the uniforms for the first time. So there's been so much going into that. And I do think just the size of Adidas, they're just such a huge entity. And I think they've been so impressed with Texas Tech and what we've done and we've been able to do. I think you're just going to see this partnership really flourish going forward.
Yeah, when you look at an athlete like Mahomes, we had that event a couple years ago with Baylor. Just his love for the university. You've worked with a lot of alumni. You've interviewed a lot of former athletes at these Hall of Fame events. What we see of Patrick Mahomes, that genuineness of him, it feels just real. It feels like he is who he is, and he loves the university. I mean, and you've have had a chance to meet with him, speak with him. Can you speak a little bit just to that genuine love he has for Texas Tech athletics? Like what we see is really what we get. Because like you said, he's probably a top 5 athlete in the entire world, and he's the face of the largest football league in the world. But yet he wears Texas Tech shirts walking these games. It's just such a blessing for our university.
Yeah, he's just a real guy who happens just to have, millions of people clamoring for a piece of him or his attention or whatever. I got to, when we walked him down to the field before we put his name on the wall, I'm just standing there's actually a picture on my bookshelf of that. I'm standing like 3 feet away from him, and just people are just screaming at him constantly. And he just kind of stared straight ahead. And I said, "What's that like?" And he said, "You just can't look, man." He goes, "You just can't look because once you do," he said, you're got to talk to everybody. But yeah, he genuinely, when he comes back, he's got a list of people he wants to see, that worked in football and been around him, his academic advisor. I mean, he's just a real guy. He's just a guy that remembers his roots, and he just hangs out. He calls Kirby all the time. He's invited Kirby to, he'll invite Kirby to his foundation golf tournament or whatever. And when Kirby walks into the room, Patrick will be with a group of people, and he'll leave that group to come over and say hello to Kirby. He doesn't have to do those things, right? These are things that he does not have to do, but he genuinely cares about Texas Tech. again, his time is limited. His resources, as far as just what he's able to do, are limited. So he's got a team that helps him with that. But even his team is really great as well. And so, when he comes back here, he always loves it. He's always trying to find a game he can come back to. He's always trying to find a basketball game that he can come to. It just didn't work out for us this year. He really wanted to be here for the Gladiator game. If we had a game on their bye weekend, we certainly would have worn that uniform first on that weekend, but it just didn't work out. His bye turned out to be our bye weekend, and so we had to make do with the Colorado weekend. But he would have been here if he could have been. This is a guy that just truly believes in Texas Tech, gave back to the South End Zone, gives back in a lot of different ways as well. Never really says no when we ask him for something. We try to not just inundate him with requests, but he is a guy that definitely walks the walk for sure.
That's awesome,
man. That is unreal. It's so cool that you have that, experience with him. I hate to transition into other athletes after going from Mahomes, because you don't ever want to feel like you're comparing somebody to Mahomes. That's really tough. But, you've experienced and interviewed a lot of different athletes in your time. Talk about some of the ones that, you've really enjoyed talking with, any unique interview experiences, some of your favorites from your time with, Texas Tech. You've spoken and done a ton of interviews. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, some of that.
Yeah, it's hard to. I was trying to think of that. Like, have had very few ones that I thought were awkward or not good. I think what is great is when they come back, you realize just how much they love this place. One of my favorites was last year when Cliff came back, right? Just because it's just different for him, right? All the pressure and everything kind of off him, and he was just be able to enjoy the fact that he was a great quarterback here, and he's really beloved here, and it didn't end the way any of us wanted to see it end. That was great. I think talking to Coach Sharp, Marcia Sharp, a couple even years before that, when she was inducted into the Hall of Honor, and then eventually into the Basketball Ring of Honor, just really great memories and great interviews. Another great basketball one was Andre Emmett when he was into the Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
He was so touched and funny and engaged. And then, Andre died tragically a year or so after that. And so that always kind of stung me when that happens. I would be remiss. My very favorite all-time Texas Tech athlete has been and remains to be Rodney Allison. And Rodney worked here for us for years. When I was young growing up, Rodney was a guy I just idolized. And then when I came to work here, he was running the Double T Varsity Club. And Rodney is just about as genuine a guy as you can find. He'll occasionally, every now and then, he'll send me a picture from a fairway in Hawaii. He retired and he moved to Hawaii, and he tries to troll me by, here's my view right now. And but just when talking to him and hearing his memories and Rodney was a guy that after he went and coached at UT Chattanooga, he coached all across the country. But when his last job was at UT Chattanooga, then he came back here and he wore a double T every day. He wore a Tech shirt every day. He just loved Texas Tech, and so that's the thing that I find when I'm interviewing all these former athletes is they've got this shared genuine love and affection for this place and the fans. And then when they've left, it really hits them too, how much it's meant to them and how much it means to come back. I love it when they come back and they haven't been here in a while. And
that's
just
awesome.
talking about Corey Carr, who was, again, another one of my favorite basketball players. He said, man, I don't even know where my old dorm is. He played in the Coliseum. He goes, the Coliseum's gone. Right. It's just, to get to hear them and talk to them when they come back. It's just really a privilege for me to get to do that. I don't know how many more years I'll get to do it, but again, every year kind of brings a new surprise or a new something that happens that makes you really, it makes you really appreciate what we have here. I think, again, is this place perfect? No. Is it great? Yes. And, I was thinking that just even when I'm walking to my car or something, I'll see a family or somebody looking in the stadium. And even if I've had a bad day or something, I try to say, hey, look, this is for everybody, right? And I'll say, hey, do you want to see in the stadium? And they're, of course, yes, we go in. And then whatever kind of bad day I had, I forget, because you forget just what joy this place brings to people. And I think when you see the former athletes, and Kirby's been great about that. Rodney was great. Now we have Will Culpepper running that. I think our former athletes love the fact that we remember them and that we respect anyone who's worn this double T, right? And what they've done for this place. And again, it's unique. I think it's the greatest place on earth. And I hope that when they've had some time to get away, they start thinking about that as well.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually was a student assistant at the Red Raider Club in college for about a year, and I was the butt of Rodney's jokes, I think, for every morning. He was one of the best guys, man. I loved working with him and getting to do some tasks. He's a great man. I'm glad he's playing a lot of golf in Hawaii. I remember he said he was retiring and moving to Hawaii, and I never believed him. So I'm glad to see he actually did it. So
I asked him, I said, "Are you getting good?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm getting pretty good." And he's really a humble guy. And so when he says that, I'm like, dang, he must really be getting to be a good golfer.
That's awesome. Well, good for him, man. I'm happy. I love Rodney as well.
Yeah, so he's a good man for sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we talked about Pat a lot. I know the four of us had some good memories watching him play at Tech. What are some of your fondest memories of Tech games that you've been at over the years?
Well, again, way back, Rodney quarterbacked us to a huge win over Texas in his junior year. That was really one of my seminal Texas Tech moments when I really started getting into being a Tech fan. I went to Lady Raiders National Championship in 1993 in Atlanta. My wife and I went to that, and that was crazy. It was great. Obviously, the Crabtree catch in 2008 stands out. I'm a baseball guy. Devin Conley making a catch to kind of seal the win over College of Charleston to send us to our first World Series. But it's hard to top the playing in the national championship game in basketball. And, we're 13 seconds away or so from winning the national championship. It didn't work out. But I remember I got to sit down on the floor for that game against Virginia. Just, the lasers spelling out Texas Tech. You kind of have to pinch yourself a little bit to go, that's probably not many of us thought we'd ever be in that situation. And to be in that situation, and that was a great team, and that was a fun team to watch, and it was a fun ride. Obviously, it didn't work out like we wanted, but just that memory just kind of gets emblazoned in you of how great that can be. I actually I'm really good friends with Tom Stone, and they beat Princeton last year here on penalty kicks. And I told Tom, I said, man, that goes in my top memories. That was so nerve wracking. And I said, I can't believe they settle a game like that. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, at that point, you just kind of got to let go and just let it happen. But just so many great things have happened here, right? I love the success of all of our programs and our student athletes. It really is very rewarding.
Yeah, Gio, we know that you're a busy guy, and we appreciate you taking the time to, spend some time with us answering these questions. This has been really awesome. I had one final thing I wanted to, ask you before we finish today. Talk about this year in Tech athletics. It feels like it's off to a really good start if you look at it from a semester perspective. Where are you really optimistic for, men's basketball, men's football? I know that those are the big ones that people care about, but some of the other athletic departments, anything that you're really pumped for the rest of this athletic year?
Yeah, I mean, call me Pollyanna, but I really think we're going to finish football strong, which is great. I think this men's basketball team is as deep and as talented as we've had in a while. I think they're going to make a really deep run in March. I think it's hard to say this because there's a lot of expectations, but we signed the best softball player in the country. Yeah. And she appears to be as advertised. I think we're going to be challenging for a national championship in softball this year. I think baseball has really made some changes. I think baseball is going to be very positive, and obviously Coach Kitley is always good at what he does in indoor and outdoor. So I think this is set up to be a really successful year for us. And I'm always very optimistic. I when we're on the road, I stand by Jonathan Boutros, our deputy AD, and I'm always like, hey, we got this, right? I feel really good about this. And he was telling Debbie McGuire last night, I was telling her something. He goes, don't listen to him. He's always optimistic. But I just think that I just choose to think that we're going to be really good across the board. And it's going to be fun to watch, right? I think that Coach Gerlich has maybe turned the corner with her program and gotten it to be where she wants, getting to be where she wants it to be. I just think there's a lot. We've got great coaches. We've got great student athletes. And I told you guys before that I think Kirby is the right AD for us and the best in the country at what he does. And so I feel really optimistic about what we've got going on here.
That's awesome.
Great
man.
answer.
Yeah. And we as fans, just same as you, we go into every game, we go into every sport with the highest optimism. And even when we lose, it's, we still show up the next Saturday or the next Tuesday or Friday at basketball. It doesn't matter. We're there. And I think that's, to your point on this episode, what makes Texas Tech such a unique and special place. So
yeah, I agree. I appreciate it. And you guys are doing, what should be done, right? That's you're living in a time where you can create content and you can do these things, and you're talking about and something you're passionate about and you love it. It makes it even better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
Gio, my family was tired of me texting all them in the group chat, so I figured I needed to broadcast it more worldwide, so I'd stop annoying all my family members.
Let your voice be heard for sure.
Yeah, well, and thank you. And, just hearing your story and how you came up in media and just your love for Texas Tech and all you're doing to help just move this university and this athletic department forward is just such a blessing. And so we just thank you as well for all the work you're doing for Texas Tech athletics and just taking an hour out of your day to spend with us, just hooligans here on the Broadway Shuffle podcast. And but we just are so thankful for your time and just hope we get to have you on again, and just look forward to the rest of the football season and continue to hear about your great work in the athletic department.
I love it. Thank you guys. Thanks for what you're doing. You've added a new listener. I'll listen all the time, and appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks, Gio.
Yep.
Well,
thanks, Joe.
Appreciate it.
Wreck 'em, and we'll see you on the next episode.